You are listening to Water Flying, a show dedicated to all things seaplanes. Brought to you by the Seaplane Pilots Association. My name is Steve McCoy. I'm the Executive Director of the Seaplane Pilots Association, which is the world's largest nonprofit advocacy organization dedicated to the protection and promotion of the water flying community. Climb aboard! We're about to start today's episode. Well, I am so happy because we've got a great show for you today here on Water Flying. Today we're going to talk about the multi-engine seaplane rating, which just happens to be the cover of the current issue of Water Flying magazine. And we have a unique opportunity or situation where we actually have 3 multi-engine seaplane pilots at the table, which is kind of a rare thing to have with only about 3,000 multi-engine seaplane pilots in the world. So I'd like to welcome Abbie Kellett, my co-pilot and fellow multi-engine seaplane pilot herself, and my good buddy and editor of Water Flying magazine, Mr. Mark Twombly. So it is quite a feat to have 3 multi-engine seaplane pilots in any one place. And it is, I'd like to just welcome Mark to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And let me just say, hi, Abbie. I'm meeting you today for the first time in person.
You know, Mark, it's really nice to put a face to the name because I've heard so much about you and I know we've talked. So it's just a pleasure. And I am excited to be here talking about some of the coolest flying I've had the opportunity to do, which is flying the Aircam. So I really want to know, how in the world did you get that picture? What is the story behind the picture on the cover of this magazine?
Well, back in a previous life, I worked for AOPA Pilot Magazine, and we did all our cover shots, air-to-air cover shots. Shots were done from another airplane. The photographer was in another airplane, and a lot of the shots that we do at Water Flying are the same. But we also do some from boats because these are seaplanes.
A little bit different than AOPA. I don't think you did very many photo shoots shots for AOPA from boats. Okay.
No, none. Can't think of one. And this particular one was done from a boat. Our excellent photographer, Brad Fuller, was in a boat that was piloted by Ian Lockwood, who is the son of Phil Lockwood, who's in the airplane with me in the cover. So Phil is a very accomplished photographer. That's the origin of the Aircam.
I was going to say literally.
Air camera, yep. Right. So he knows his stuff. He's done many, many photo shoots with the Aircam, and he knows the best angles and
right.
how to get the shots. So he set this all up. We flew up to his house on Lake Jackson in Sebring. And Ian was at the ready, Brad drove up, got in the boat, and we had a route we were going to fly. And so we made several rounds, and we flew just a few feet from this boat. Very close. I've really never flown that close to an object, whether it's an airplane or whatever. We were right there.
And we will stress, we are trained professionals.
Yes. Well, so full disclosure here, Phil had me do a few circuits flying on, and he said, well, here, let me show you how to do it. And so that shot right there probably is with Phil in the rear cockpit.
All I know
the controls
is I got a call from Brad saying, well, you're going to love the shot. And the boat has new yellow racing stripes on it. So,
oh, wow.
Seriously, it was about that close.
I mean, you can see just like, good grief, every speck of hair on your head. We can read your hat. That's
good because there aren't many hairs on my head to begin with. So,
oh my goodness,
this is just a portion of the photo.
Right.
We cropped it for the vertical. It was a horizontal. And to see the whole photo, you have the boat wake right there. We just cropped out the boat wake. We are, this is not, a telephoto.
Oh, no.
Where it looks close. This is a wide angle, and we're right there.
That is just awesome. Just the precision that had to go into this. You know, everyone being at the top of their game being safe, everyone being aligned and
with
just
the right
amazing.
light. We had to be
Yes.
at the angle for the right light. So
Exactly.
we made, I don't know, at least a half dozen circuits of the little area of the lake we
Wow.
worked in, and to get it.
Wow.
It was a hoot.
So, I've had the good experience of flying the Aircam. I hate to say it, I'm probably one of its largest fans as a non-owner. I hope to own one someday. But what's your impression of flying the Aircam? What was the overall experience?
Well, every airplane's different, and you look for. I'm sure you're asked, Abbie, what's the best airplane? What's the most fun airplane you've ever flown, and so on? And I can't answer that because each one is different in its own way.
That's true.
This one would have to rank right up there with one of the most pleasurable, most fun airplanes to fly because of its performance, for one. There's no substitute for power, and this has it in combination with its big wing and so on. It has tremendous takeoff performance. Where you sit in the front cockpit, you're right out there in front. There's no obstructions to limit your view, so you have this fantastic view. It's a stick. It's just you're sitting up kind of high, which is neat.
But you're sitting in front of the float. So describe that experience, that magic carpet feeling.
There is a photo in the story that somewhat, I think, shows the perspective of what the pilot sees, which is nothing.
Right, you just see
nothing
water
of
in
the
front
airplane.
of you. Yeah.
Yeah, just the water. You have a little bit of an outline of a windshield. Otherwise, the world is right there from 90 degrees either side of you. You just have this panoramic view, and it's great for just the pleasure of it. It's great for the flying part of it too.
I remember getting into a comment with someone, or a passionate discussion with someone. I said, there's nothing that has a better visibility than the Aircam. And it's like, oh, no, I have a Super Cub. You can't beat the visibility in a Super Cub. And I said, well, I actually own a Super Cub, and I can tell you that the Aircam is even better than the Super Cub. So
if you're inside any cockpit, you have less of a view than here because you're
there's
not
blind
inside
spots.
anything.
Yeah, it's incredible. And, it's the performance. Talk a little bit about the performance that you experience in the Aircam. I mean, the takeoff performance is pretty stellar.
Yes, spirited, whatever adjective you want to use.
I like spirited.
Yes. It again, multi-engine, just 100 horsepower each, but that's 200 horsepower, and it has a large high-lift wing on it, and those two aspects. And Phil also says he has specially designed wing tips that contribute to this. I haven't figured out the aerodynamics of that yet, but he says the wing tips, the power, all contribute to this incredible takeoff performance. And he does, if you explore the Aircam videos, you can see him take off on one engine in the Aircam, and that's pretty hard to do in a multi-engine airplane.
And they're just little Rotaxes,
Yeah.
just little 100 horse. Wow.
Right.
But, there's something different. The one thing about the Aircam kind of harks back to the Sukhoi is the only thing that I can relate to where the entire tail surface is covered by prop wash. And so if you go back to our days with the Sukhois, going back to the aerobatic world, the Sukhoi was unique at the time because with a 9-foot propeller, the entire tail surface and ailerons, the full-length ailerons, were covered by the prop wash. And in the Aircam with the two high-mounted engines, each engine ensures that the entire elevator surface and rudder surface is getting a lot of wash. So I think that's a lot of the takeoff performance as well.
Right. And it also, the pusher configuration helps with the lack of yaw on a single engine operation because you're not getting air blowing up over one wing like you would in a conventional multi-engine airplane with a tractor configuration.
That's true. So getting into some of the meat of it, so the checklist use, seaplanes, really anything, especially multi-engine, you have all these procedures, you have specified checklists for what you're flying. So I know the Aircam had a gifts checklist, which was specific to the Aircam that you went through in training. So there was also the will not checklist, So tell us a little bit about that.
The checklists, of course, are fundamental in any airplane, no matter how simple, so you don't forget some essential item like putting the gear down.
Of course.
The GIFs checklist is one that Aircam uses. Gear, instruments, where you check obviously all your instruments. Flaps to the wire for most water landings. It's 25 degrees. There's no flap indicator, so you have to look back, and you extend the flaps to one of the strut supporting wires. Fuel pumps on. Trim, and then S is for speed. About 65 mile per hour is what you want to fly your base and final approach at.
And you do not want to get slow. I remember that.
Low speed, high drag airplane, which is
grief.
really one of the things that is drilled into you in the training, and it's very important because you can get into trouble quickly.
Jason's really good about that. So
Yeah.
the will not checklist is something that we go through, in the training in the Cubs. So looking at a body of water, your goal is to not hurt anybody, including yourself. You don't want to land on a boat. You don't want to land on a swimmer. So going through that will not of wind, water, the lane that you're going to land on, noise abatement, can you be a better neighbor, obstructions or traffic, towers, terrain, thunderstorms, any threats that you experience up there or you see. So did you find yourself using that will not checklist pretty actively?
I did, and it does take a bit of practice to use both will not and GIFs when there's a lot going on in a training flight.
Right. So low in altitude.
Yes, exactly. And maybe you're doing multiple takeoff and landings on a particular body of water, and you want to do both of those checklists every time. And the will not was new to me as a checklist, so it takes practice to get all of that down. Make sure you're covering every one of those letters in there.
And as simple as the Aircam is to operate, I think that's one of the big things, is not being lulled into a complacency where you forget to do these checklists, because they're really critical in a seaplane. Mm-hmm. And so it is. You're operating very low altitude, and you're flying a very different airplane from anything that you've ever flown before. And
on the GIFs checklist, the Aircam we're flying has Claymore floats, amphibious floats, and it has a gear position indicator lights in the cockpit. One of the unusual things about the gear system in the Aircam is after the gear is up and you get the lights, you hold this toggle switch up to make sure that it's in place, another 4 or 5 seconds. Then you check the gear straws on the float itself. And the Aircam I found a little unusual in that it has a forward gear straw for the front for nose gear, and then one over the main gear. So it has 2 straws on each float. It's kind of difficult to crank your head around and see that rear gear straw. It helps to have somebody in the rear cockpit to confirm that straw is in the correct position.
Right. Yeah, or use your back passenger. Yeah, your back passenger.
Exactly.
Someone that knows what they're talking about that can confirm that. Because, landing gear down, that's just no joke. I know we've talked about it here. It's something that seaplane pilots just need to be aware of constantly. Go through your checklist. Check your gear.
an amphibian pilot should never be comfortable with the gear position. I mean, that's what it just comes down to. So,
absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about the single engine operations in the Aircam, because they're kind of unique as well.
So, you talked about the power, the little 912 road taxes that you have on the Aircam, just an amazing amount of power. So where does that come from that you're able to take off with nothing, with no yaw, and just amazing performance?
It's a fairly light aircraft. It's fabric covered. Most of the structure is fabric. There's not a lot going on in the cockpits at all, so there is not much to the structure in terms of mass or weight. So it's fairly light, and 100 horsepower doesn't sound like a lot, but you got 2 of those. You got 200 horsepower. And again, the engines are positioned high on the wing in a pusher configuration, much closer to the center line of the airplane than you find on most multi-engine airplanes. So for single-engine operations, that's a distinct advantage because you when you have one engine inoperative, the other one is pretty close to the center line. You don't have a moment out there that's causing a lot of yaw. Plus, you don't have air flowing over the wing creating lift on one wing. That would also add to that tendency. So it, in terms of yaw on a single engine, there is not much on an Aircam, and that's a great safety advantage, no question.
I really did. I found that amazing, just the amount of power you could get on a single engine in that thing. I mean, I don't want to say it's a kite. It's an airplane. It's got weight to it, but good grief, that thing is light, and you can take off on a dime. It blew my mind every time, honestly.
I challenge you to provide me with another multi-engine seaplane that'll take off on a single engine from a dead stop.
I forfeit that challenge. I can't win that. So the Aircam is pretty much it.
I will tell a little story. I did some work with Twin Commanders and Aero Commanders, and when they first came out with the first multi-engine Aero Commander, they took off from Oklahoma City, the airport in Oklahoma City, and on one engine, and flew it to Washington, D.C.
Wow.
As a sort of a marketing stunt. However, they took the prop off the other engine.
So it wasn't quite fair.
And I don't know what else they did to accomplish that, but it was highly unusual, and I don't think you certainly couldn't do it today, and I doubt there's any other multi-engine airplane you could take off on one engine.
Yeah, and especially an amphibian, where you've got all the drag of the water and all that to get over with.
Definitely.
So the Aircam is an amphibious airplane, so you need to go through amphibian procedures, and we talked a little bit about the importance of gear position, but why don't you talk to me about some of the training aspects of training in the Aircam and that amphibian factor?
Well, as we discussed, checklist use is primary to make sure the gear is in the position you want it to be in for the surface you're going to land on. And as Steve mentioned, the first thing you should do after takeoff from hard surface runway is raise the gear.
Positive rate gear up.
Yes, don't leave the gear down because you're setting yourself up for a problem if you have to land on the water or plan to land on the water. If you're distracted, as has happened, unfortunately, too many times with people, they forget to put the gear down after taking off from a hard surface runway.
So sterile cockpit, takeoffs, landings, most critical phases of flight, trying to keep it sterile, trying to keep everything nice and quiet so you can focus on those checklists. And 500 feet, you're pretty much always in that critical phase of flight.
Mm-hmm. So. And you have two ways of confirming the gear is in the position you want it, and one is the indicator lights on the panel, the other is the straws on the floats. And as Abbie said, if you have a passenger in the rear seat, put that person to work to confirm that the straws are
use
where
them
they
as your
should be.
second gear warning system. But you have no performance. You have no audible cues. You have no performance cues.
No. One other interesting thing I found in the training, reading through the manual, was if you have some sort of gear failure, and there are multiple kinds of failures you could have. Basically, the answer is if you ever have any gear down that you can't raise, 1, 2, 3, whatever, you're landing on land. Never ever land on water with even just one gear down. So if they fail up, fine, just land on the water, no problem. And you can land on land without a great deal of damage, but never land in the water with even one gear extended.
Yeah, that's a tempting but fatal error for people to do.
We all need that tattooed on ourselves. So, gear up water landing. So, the experience in training. So, what you experienced, you had to come to the training with your multi-engine land first. They don't have you get in a multi-engine airplane and expect you to learn all this sea stuff, reading the water, operating at 500 feet in a multi-engine airplane, which most people don't do. So what do you think that was like? Because you came in here with an Aztec, so
yes,
you have a multi-engine land airplane.
Far, far more difficult to fly than the Aircam. And the multi-engine training in the Aircam, I think the purpose it serves is to show you that it's very safe flying aircraft on one engine. That's assuring. That's reassuring.
Yeah, it is.
That was my takeaway.
What I got out of the training in terms of operating the aircraft safely is it's a low speed, high drag airplane, and you always need to be aware of that. Don't let yourself get into a position where you're so slow behind the power curve, whatever, that something bad could happen.
Yeah, if you get into that zero thrust situation, you need to. It's remarkable how much you have to point that thing down to the ground and how quickly you have to do it.
That's one of the demonstrations we did. Was the only way you're going to have a dual power failure in this thing is if you run out of gas.
Right.
It's happened, and so you chop the power and see how quickly you need to get that nose down to about 85 miles an hour, I think, and to give yourself a little bit of margin on the flare to land whatever you're going to land on.
Without that mass and with that high drag, it's pretty amazing.
You got to put that nose down, or you just
a barn door.
Got no chance. Yeah, the barn door.
Yeah. So, what's the real takeaway from everything here? What can you tell our listeners about the Aircam / multi-engine C experience and why someone might want to do it?
For someone who's contemplating getting an Aircam, it's a very safe airplane on single engine. The training is Aircam specific, I say, because of this. Here's what the airplane is. Here's what it can do. Here's how it can get you into trouble, and the trouble is mostly getting too slow in it. Mm-hmm. It's not preparation for flying just about any other multi-engine seaplane. You need to have specific training in the airplane. If you want to fly another multi-engine seaplane, you need to have very specific, thorough training in that airplane.
And there's very few of those out there that you can get training in, so it is a challenge. We had a Twin B land here a little bit earlier before we started the show. I think there's a Beach 18 that's going to come available for training on floats up in Minnesota that we're hoping to cover in the magazine shortly. There's a widgeon, a goose out there randomly, but multi-engine sea training is really kind of an enigma. It's hard to get it.
Very.
So where you're at now, you have the rating, you fly multi-engine land, you have your multi-engine sea. You wouldn't feel comfortable necessarily jumping into a widgeon or jumping into another multi-engine sea aircraft without training.
Absolutely. And, you mentioned the widgeon. It's not just the fact that it's a multi-engine airplane. The widgeon, has these sort of porpoising tendencies, especially the earlier widgeons. So it's not just a single-engine operations in a multi-engine airplane. It's the particular characteristics of that airplane. And all seaplanes, they're kind of different than land airplanes. They all behave differently, and you need to learn what those behaviors are to be safe and operate efficiently. So that's a big part of, and that goes for single-engine seaplanes as well.
But, and outside of the Twin Otter, there's not very many twin-engine float airplanes. Most of them are hull aircraft, and that's like with the widgeon. It's a completely different creature as far as how you do the approach, how you stay on step, and we found that out with the Sea Ray that we were flying.
Mm-hmm. My bottom line takeaway?
It
is an incredibly fun airplane to fly. It was a seriously pleasurable experience to get in that thing, sit in the front cockpit, taxi out, kind of get used to. I used to fly ultralights, and the early ones we'd call riding the pipe, and and it was kind of like riding the pipe again. You're out there with nothing else out there, and just this fantastic view and the performance. It was great.
Awesome. Well, I have to tell you, Mark, you're doing, as always, you do an amazing job on the magazine, but this issue with the Aircam on the cover is by far, I think, the most beautiful cover we've ever had on the magazine. It's a great story. If you want to learn more about the Aircam, more about doing multi-engine sea training, look us up at the Seaplane Pilots Association. You can get a hold of Mark at editor@seaplanes.org. We'll try to share our experience with you and get you what you need to answer your questions on actually making this come true. So I think that is it. We are out of time today. Again, Mark, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for the amazing job you're doing on the magazine, and congratulations for joining the Club of Multi-Engine Seaplane Pilots.
Congratulations. You're one of us
much.
now.
Thanks. It was fun. Thanks.
Awesome. If you like today's show, I highly encourage you to join the Seaplane Pilots Association and become a member of the largest seaplane community in the world. Members receive Water Flying, the only full-color glossy magazine dedicated to the seaplane community. And it's available in both printed and digital form. Your membership also includes access to the Water Landing Directory app, which has the Seaplane Flight School Directory and a calendar of seaplane events not only here in the United States, but around the world. The association hosts regular educational workshops, safety seminars, and gatherings for seaplane pilots and anyone with a passion for seaplanes. So look us up online at seaplanes.org, join our community, and support our mission of protecting and promoting water flying.